If you're looking for healthy habits that will change your life, then this video is for you. In today's episode, I interview Dr. Benjamin Hardy as we discuss his new book, Personality Isn't Permanent. We talk about how to break away from self-limiting beliefs and how to define a better future. And if you're enjoying this episode, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Hello and welcome to Health and Humanity with Dan Voss, a health podcast show centered around living healthier lifestyles and improving our human connection and relationships. I have with me today Dr. Benjamin Hardy. Dr. Benjamin Hardy is an organizational psychologist and best-selling author of Willpower Doesn't Work. His blogs have been read by over 100 million people and are featured on Forbes, Fortune, CNBC, Cheddar, Big Think, and many others. He is a regular contributor to Inc. and Psychology Today, and from 2015 through 2018, he was the #1 writer in the world on Medium.com. He and his wife Lauren adopted 3 children through the foster system in February 2018, and 1 month later, Lauren became pregnant with twins, who were born in December of 2018. They live in Orlando. Ben, how are you today?
Doing awesome. Doing really good, man. So glad to be with you.
Yeah, I really appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your message. And you have a brand new book that's coming out shortly here, Personality Isn't Permanent. So I'm really excited to dive into that a little deeper and hear your thoughts. But I know you have so many great ideas and thoughts in this book, and I'm really excited to get into that a little bit further. So
awesome.
First question I have for you, I want to talk a little bit about your background in psychology. Obviously, you went to school for psychology and earned a PhD. But what is it that got you interested in the topic of psychology and personalities and just that human mindset?
Yeah. Well, a few major things are what got me interested in psychology. One, grew up in a crazy background of trauma and addiction. My father was a drug addict. When my parents got divorced, it just really threw my father for a loop. And basically from when I was age 11 to 20, he was just in a really dark place.
Wow.
And there was essentially zero stability in my life. So that was really crazy. But I look back on it now, to be fully honest with you, with only good feelings. My father has overcome all of his addictions. I actually, at the age of 20, went on a church mission for 2 years. So I reconnected with my faith in God, went on a church and mission, and that experience totally blew my mind.
Yeah.
Read lots of books, had lots of experiences, and that's the thing that really got me interested in psychology. But just knowing how much people can change, reading books, figuring out how much, I've watched myself change like crazy. And just really wanting to understand how people work is what led me to getting into psychology, wanting to understand why people get stuck, wanting to understand how the mind works. Wanting to know how motivation works. I just wanted to really dive deep for myself and hopefully to provide to others.
Yeah.
And I will say my father definitely has overcome all of his past, which is really cool. And one obviously key aspect of reframing or removing traumas from your life is choosing better perspectives of former experiences. And so I choose to look back on my past as it was all very beneficial to my future.
Yeah, that's so neat. And I know you talk about that quite a bit in your book, is the idea of taking what has happened to you in the past and reframing that to form a better image and even like setting goals for becoming a better future self. So I find that super interesting. Maybe you can talk a little bit more on how you were able to use that with your own life in terms of taking past traumas and realizing that that doesn't have to define who you are, and it doesn't have to be who you are in the future. Are you able to
shouldn't define who you are? I think that's kind of the default, but it's a terrible approach. So in psychology, there's a concept called a refractory period. Refractory period is the amount of time it takes to emotionally recover from an experience. And often people are defined by former experiences for their entire lives. A trauma is essentially, it could be big or small, but it's any event that impacts your identity. And your identity is the way you see yourself. And by the way, identity is way more important than personality. Identity is how you define and describe yourself, whereas personality is how you behaviorally show up. So it's how you show up in situations.
Sure.
But your identity is the thing that guides your personality.
Okay.
And so the problem with traumas is that something negative happens to you, and then you view yourself negatively as a result. And obviously that's what happens with trauma, whether you go through a negative experience or whether you fail in some way and then you're defined by the past. The goal is to not be defined by the past.
Okay.
And the only way out of that is to approach it. You can't avoid it. One of the reasons why something stays a trauma is because you're ignoring it or because you're actively avoiding it. You actually have to face it, deal with it. I recommend journaling about your experiences, writing them down in all the detail and writing down the impact it had on you. And then ultimately choosing a better perspective. A lot of times it takes actually having conversations with people about it, where you're getting it out of your system and turning it into a story. And then you can choose to look at the story from different perspectives. So like as an example, there's a quote from Gandhi. It's attributed to Gandhi, but he said, I cried when I had no shoes until I saw the person who had no feet. Wow. I don't know if you've ever heard that.
Yeah.
But the reason that's important is because like it's just a meaning. Having no shoes doesn't have to be bad. It could be viewed as it could be viewed as doesn't really matter. It could be viewed as this is the worst thing in the world, or it could be viewed as this is actually really good. I'm actually super lucky. It's all just the choice that you give the meaning to.
100%. Yeah, I find that applies to what's going on in the world right now. You know, we have a year that many people, I mean, most people are sharing that it's just an awful year. Just every month, it seems like something else happens that makes it worse. But I think the most important concept or the most important thing to hold on to there is perception and perspective, and realize that unfortunately somebody else out there has it worse than I do. If I'm going through a tough time, and that kind of reminded me, that quote you said from Gandhi is, I could have a setback or a fallback, but it could be much worse. And I'm going to learn from this and use it.
You could be dead.
Right. Yeah. 100%.
Right?
That's so true. That's so true. So I just find it, such a fascinating time. Sure, it's a challenging year, but I think there's a lot of good that's coming from all of this, things that we can learn from and improve upon.
I think you're 100% right, man. It's really twofold. One is choosing the meaning you give to this experience. The second one is actually having purpose to get yourself through it. So the idea that this is a horrible or awful year is a meaning. To me, it's not a horrible or awful year. It's a very fascinating year. It's a crazy year. Yeah, there's a lot of tragedy and a lot of confusion, but actually this could be one of the most powerful years to propel the world forward. And so it's about actively choosing beneficial meanings, but it's also about having a sense of purpose for your future that makes the present meaningful. And that's our choice. That's that whole science of your future self. But, there's a lot of good stuff on this. Like Viktor Frankl, who wrote the book Man's Search for Meaning, he was very big on and this really relates to COVID-19 and everything going on. Like the Holocaust was way worse in World War II. 6 million people died and were gassed and stuff like that. And Frankl's perspective was, if you don't have a sense of purpose for your future and hope, the present will suck. The present will be horrible. It'll be unbearable. It'll be something you distract yourself from or something that you're looking to die from. And so you need to really clarify a future way beyond all of this craziness, beyond these circumstances, so that you actually have something to get gritty about. Angela Duckworth, who studied grit, she found that you can't really have a lot of grit if you don't have a lot of hope. You need hope and purpose to have grit. And the cool part about purpose is that it's freely chosen. That's what Frankl said. It's not something you discover. It's a freely chosen purpose. You don't find it. You choose something that gives your life meaning.
I love that. Yeah. So what you mentioned, before, journaling is a good thing. And I, in general, believe that we as a society, we don't spend enough time alone, just sitting in our thoughts and thinking about who we want to be and who we want to become. So what are some other steps besides journaling, maybe just practicing mindfulness? What can we be doing to find that hope, especially at a time right now where so many of us are struggling to be hopeful, to be positive and see a positive future? What can we be doing maybe on a daily basis to kind of foster that positive energy?
Totally. I mean, I wouldn't brush journaling off. If people actually did it daily, their life would change. Gratitude journaling, actually deciding who their future self was, doing community service, just just as one example, I mean, I don't do an enormous amount of community service, but I have 5 kids, you know, and we adopted 3 of them. Like, I do a lot of service that gives a lot of my life meaning, and I do some forms of service. I could do a lot more, and maybe I'd have a lot more hope and joy if I did.
Sure.
But I think that getting out of your head, getting out of passivity creates depression. And so having something that you're actively working towards, that's challenging you, that's pushing you, that's keeping your mind engaged.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, making progress towards goals creates confidence, and that enhances your sense of hope.
Sure.
And your sense of motivation. So just not getting caught up in the noise. You know, there's another big concept, and that's watching your inputs, like watching the environment that you're letting into your head. Your hope's going to be pretty wrecked if you're just spending all your time watching mainstream news. Like, it's pretty destructive. It's pretty devastating. And I could understand if you're letting all that stuff in your head, why you wouldn't feel great about life and great about the world. I purposefully, I prefer the concept of strategic ignorance. Not that I'm completely ignorant. I'm actually very informed, but I'm very aware of what I let into my head, because I know that impacts my mindset. And so I think you got to be really clear about your environment as well.
Yeah. So it sounds like you're taking control of what you can control. Like, there's certain things that we cannot control, and we have to accept that to a degree, but there are a lot of things in life that we do have control over. And I think a lot of people lose sight of that, and they think, well, this is my situation and I'm just going to accept it. But it sounds like you're doing a really good job of controlling what's controllable.
Yeah. Okay. I could do a lot better even still, but yeah, we have a lot of control. Yeah. I can't control when, for example, the virus is going to find like a healing, like, or whatever, like what do you call that? My brain's
just the when the virus passes, or like,
like, I can't control that. I can't control when an earthquake's going to happen, but I can definitely control if I'm going to be present during this conversation or not. I can be present. I can control if I'm going to have a great day. Even if something goes not to plan, I can control when I'm going to go to bed. And I know that a lot of people, they don't think, but I mean, we have so much control over our life and our outcomes. There's big picture stuff that we can't control, but as far as like what happens to me today and what happens to me in the next 3 to 5 years, a lot of things I can control. There's going to be a lot of things that are unexpected. I could get hit by a car.
Sure.
But like, there's a lot of things I can control. And the more choice and agency you have, the more hope you'll have. It's actually very difficult to have any sense of hope if you don't think you have control.
Wow. You
actually can't have hope if you don't think that your choices matter.
Man, that is so powerful. Those you just dropped a whole bunch of awesome golden nuggets there. There's one thing I'm actually practicing a lot more is intentionality with my relationships. And I find that prior to practicing this specific practice I'm going to share with you, I would kind of just go about my conversations just willy-nilly, if you will, like just kind of whatever happened, whatever conversations I had. It was just kind of like free form. But now I'm starting to practice every conversation I go into, whether it's a phone call or I'm picking up my girlfriend from work or whatever it is. I go into that conversation before it even happens, knowing, like, asking myself, what is it that I want to communicate with this person? How do I want to, what tone do I want to talk in? Do I want to be happy, sad, angry? What kind of emotions am I putting out there? So it's just spending like a quick 20 seconds, like, okay, I don't want to get in an argument with my girlfriend.
Quick visualization, right?
Yeah, it's like visualization, right? It's like, this is the person I want to be in this conversation prior to even having that conversation.
I think it's genius. I mean, I would even ask, like, what's the outcome I want to get out of this conversation? Therefore, who must I be to get that outcome? Like, when I was writing a lot of blog posts, and I still do to some degree, but I would always ask myself that question before writing the articles. What is the goal that I have for this communication? What is the thing I'm trying to actually say? And I think, like, a lot of times people just sit and crank write something out, and it turns into something, but it doesn't actually have a purpose. It doesn't convey a it's not intentional, as you're describing. And there's a lot of good research on the idea that you have to actually formulate a future self in order to be intentional. Because if you don't have a sense of who you want to be, then it's impossible to be intentional. Like, it doesn't matter what you do because you have no direction. And so in order to be intentional on a daily basis, you have to actually think about, who do I want to be in the future? Where do I want my actions to take me? Therefore, and that when you begin living intentionally more on a daily basis, then you're not living on autopilot. You're not being reactive to the environment. Instead, you're actually purposefully choosing what you do this day, and what you do this day translates to who you want to be. And that's how you have a lot more learning experiences and grow as a person.
I'm so happy you brought that up. I'm in the midst of reading one of Brendan Burchard's books, his most recent book. I'm drawing a blank on the title. It may be High Performance Habits, I believe, yeah. And an exercise that he encourages his readers to do is spend some time thinking about 3 words that you want to be used to describe you. So I came up with 3 words. Mine are healthy, grateful, and kind. And then he suggested to put in an alarm on your phone to go off at the same hour. So like every day at like 9:30 in the morning, I have an alarm that goes off. And in the iPhone, you can just kind of change the text. So instead of it just saying an alarm, you can put in specific text. So I have every morning 9:30, it says, I am healthy, I am grateful, and I am kind. And every single day I'm seeing that. And it's just that repetition of the person of who I want to become in the future.
So smart, man. That's like what I would call environment design, where you've literally designed a trigger or designed an environmental cue to remind you of your future self, remind you of the person you want to be, so that you can stick with being intentional rather than just getting caught up in the day, right?
Yeah, 100%. And I want to touch on a little bit of that, because I know in the book you talk about the idea of breaking through, and we've talked about it a little bit here, about breaking through past, and we talked about trauma. But I just love that idea of being really intentional on future self. So what is it, that you'd like to touch on in terms of framing that mindset to become that person that you want to become?
Yeah. Well, it's first off very important to realize. So Dr. Carol Dweck, she is the person who came up with the concept of fixed mindset versus growth mindset. People with a fixed mindset are very definitive about who they are today. So like if you fail a test, for example, that's who you are and that's who you'll always be. And so like who you are right now is the be all end all. Whereas with a growth mindset, you don't honestly really care that much who you are today. You're more focused on who you can become in the future. Who you are today, if you fail the test or if you succeed, oh well, like you're not defined by where you are right now, because you know you can change and grow. And that's really where the research in personality is first off, you want to recognize that you're not the same person you were in the past. You're a different person than you were 3 to 5 years ago. 10 years ago, you were a very different person. And so you're not the same person you were in the past, and you're not going to be the same person in the future. And it's very good for decision-making to view your future self as a different person. And so I think first off, just recognizing that your future self's going to be in a different place. They're going to have different perspectives, different priorities. They're going to be able to make better decisions than you, probably. They're going to be in a totally different situation. Who knows what life's going to be like in 3 to 5 years from now, right? And so like, it's kind of interesting when you actually think back on your former self's decision making. Like think back on like you 3 to 5 years ago and like the decisions you thought were good decisions back then, where it's like today you're like, I would never do that. Your future self's going to be saying that same thing about the decisions you're making today. And so the reason that's so crucial is that you don't want to be so definitive with your current self. This is why overly labeling yourself and things like that can be detrimental, is because you become so obsessed and fixated on who you are today, and that leads you to not being imaginative about who you could be in the future. It also leads you to actually being hyper defensive about like the labels you give yourself, whether it's introvert, any of the personality tests that they give you. Those tests can lead you to being very rigid and fixated in your mindset and stunt your imagination and desire for change. So I think, Daniel Gilbert, who's the Harvard psychologist who spent a lot of time studying this, he actually has a TED Talk called Psychology of Your Future Self. The big problem that he first suggests is that very few people spend much time even thinking about or imagining their future self. We spend way more time remembering the past. And so first step is honestly just imagining your future self. That's why, again, I recommend journaling so much. But getting into a cool environment, it could be out in nature, it could just be in your car, drive to a different neighborhood, drive to a cool spot. Get yourself in a peaceful environment, turn off your phone, and just imagine where you want to be and write about it. Again, from what Viktor Frankl said, your future self is not someone you discover. It's who you decide to be. It's a freely chosen purpose. It's a freely chosen task.
It's very intentional.
So just deciding, who do you want to be? Like literally, like, I don't know who your future self is, but like, it's your choice where you're going to be in 3 years from now. You can come up with that. You could write it down. It could be, up to you. It has nothing to do. It doesn't have to be determined by your past results. It doesn't have to be determined by, where you're at right now. You can make a big decision about where you want to be, and then you can courageously and boldly pursue that and make crazy leaps. Whereas maybe most of your peer group, they're not spending that much time. They've got some perception of where they want to be, but they're not clarifying it and they're not actively chasing it. Where if you do that over a 3 to 5 year period of time, the people around you kind of are shocked by how far your life goes because they're not spending that much time intentionally moving forward.
Right. Yeah, that's powerful. I'm happy you brought up some of the personality traits. I'm not sure if being introvert or extrovert is a personality trait, but I know a lot of people talk about it, and it seems like it's talked about quite a bit in the last several years. And just personally, like if I were to look back at some of my younger years, like grammar school and high school, I would probably identify as extrovert. Like I was very outgoing. I like to talk. I like to be around people. That's where I got a lot of my energy from. And then as I got a little bit older, I was learning that I was more introverted, and it's probably from some of those tests like the Myers-Briggs. And that I almost got like stuck in that mindset from like after college, really from like my early 20s through now. I'm 28 now. And the last, let's say 6, 7, 8 years, I've kind of identified as an introvert. I don't want to be around people too much. I get more energy off just being alone. And now with quarantine, and I'm spending so much time inside alone, I'm like, man, I miss being around people. And when I do have some social interactions now that things are opening up again, and I am around more people, I'm like, man, maybe I'm extrovert. So now I'm kind of coming around to the idea, it's like maybe I'm both. Like it's okay to be a little bit of both. So I just found that kind of interesting. You were talking about not getting stuck in that mindset of this is exactly who I am. You can be a little bit more open into allowing yourself to develop something new and fresh.
Yeah, there's no such thing as an introvert or an extrovert in reality.
Tell us a little bit more about that.
That's a quote from Carl Jung. Okay. Carl Jung is the psychologist who the Myers-Briggs is actually based upon.
Okay.
But he said that there's no such thing as a pure introvert or a pure extrovert, and such a person would be in a lunatic asylum. Because like here's how it really works. Have you ever heard of a bell curve?
Yes.
Yeah, so like when you would take like a scientific personality test, and the one that I would recommend is the Big Five. Big Five, you could take that, and then what you would get is a score on 5 dimensions.
Okay.
And you would get a percentile rank versus the rest of society.
Got it.
So like you would answer a bunch of questions scoring 1 out of 5. 1 being like disagree, 5 being totally agree, 3 being neutral. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And you'd be asked a bunch of questions, and then you'd get a percentile rank on extroversion, on conscientiousness, which is a score called, basically about how organized you are, how emotionally stable you are. And chances are you'd be somewhere in the middle, because with a bell curve, most of the people are in the middle. And being in the middle means that you're pretty much quite introverted and quite extroverted. Sure. That's called normal. If you're way to one end where you're like, like a total outlier with introversion, that might mean you've got some emotional issues, right? Or if like you're way too far on the other end, that might mean you also have some emotional or attachment issues. And so like being somewhere in the middle where you're actually like, you need both. You would never actually call yourself an introvert or an extrovert, because that's such a strange, not only label, but also it's just not an accurate description of a human being.
Sure.
You're just, like at me as an example, how I would score myself is I'm probably somewhere in like the 50th or 60th percentile for extroversion. Like I love being alone, love reading books, but also I have a wife, 5 kids. I'm having a great time talking to you.
Yeah.
But it's the identity that you have. And identity is more important than personality. And if you've called yourself an introvert, you're going to think you're more extreme than you really are. And you're going to think you need to be alone more than you really do, because that's the identity that you've given yourself. And you're saying, I'm an introvert. I need to be alone. I don't get energy when I'm with people. That's all a story. Yeah. It's a freaking story. And it leads to weird behavior, and it leads to limiting perspectives, whether you say one way or the other. It's just, the ultimate goal is just to decide who your future self is and what you want in your life. And then to use that as the basis for what you do.
Yeah.
Versus, and we all have tendencies. We're all at a certain place, Your personality is very much your comfort zone. And so it may be out of my comfort zone to go and ask my boss for a raise. But if I have a future self that's making more money, I better go out of my comfort zone and ask my boss for a raise, because my future self matters more than my current comfort zone.
Yeah.
Right. And you can then expand your comfort zone. So I think what people do these days is they're very good at clarifying their comfort zone and saying, this is who I am.
Yep.
And this is where my boundaries are. And I'm not really comfortable going outside of this. It's like, all right, cool, man. Good for you. I'm really glad you spent a lot of time clarifying that.
Exactly. Yeah. And I feel like a lot of that is because it creates a safe space for them. And in terms of being like introvert, extrovert, I feel like it allows people, like they now have an identity and kind of like a tribe. Like they're like proud, like, oh, I'm extrovert now. Like I'm with all my other extroverts. Like it gives them that like sense of security and safety, knowing that they can identify with a group of people. Do you think that's kind of true?
Yeah, and that's why people like it. And that's why we do form identities in many ways. And we become part of peer groups and we form different languages. Like if you're a gamer, you're going to speak the language of your gamer friends. If you're going to church, you're going to speak the language of your church friends. If you're in psychology, you're going to speak. So like we form groups, and then we have cliques, and we speak, we form a language. If you're a skater, you're going to talk the language of the skaters. So that's how you form an identity, but that also then shapes your future outcomes.
Sure.
Your peer group in very, very large ways shapes what you can do. And so you want to be very proactive and thoughtful about, well, what are the identities of the groups that I want to be a part of? Because where are those things leading to, and what are those going to create as far as my future outcomes? Yeah. And is that group something I really want to get so involved in?
It's interesting. So on a human psychology level, like what is it that makes us want to be in a tribe or a group of people? Like, does it come down to a level of security and safety? Like what's the history of that, if you have anything?
Belonging is huge. We need a sense of belonging as people. Human beings need people. I mean, it's not like we're just like born with people and then born to be like out in the middle of nowhere. Human beings need people. Yep. There's a lot of research on like we need touch as well. Like, like touch is a big thing for healing trauma. Right. Like even if it's just having a hug. So you need other people to be mentally healthy. You need just healthy relationships.
Right. Yeah.
It's not that it's not. And honestly, healthy relationships are one of the biggest predictors of longevity. If you have good, healthy relationships where you feel like you matter, you're probably going to make good decisions. If you feel like you're a loser and that no one cares about you, then you're more likely to be in addiction cycles and stuff like that, because you just feel like no one really cares about you anyways. So like you need healthy relationships, not only to have a sense of belonging, but also to have a sense that your life matters. And healthy relationships predict longevity, honestly, more than like your diet.
Yeah. I'm so happy you brought that up, because a few things. I've talked about the idea of, I'm sure you've heard of blue zones.
I've read that book. It's a great book. Different
pockets of the world that their population, they live very, very long, into their early hundreds or more longer. And so they've identified different practices that these people, like their lifestyles, what they do, the foods that they eat, exercising, but there's one component there, and it's a sense of community. These people are interacting with their neighbors, they're getting together with family and friends, they have healthy relationships. So I just found that really fascinating. You brought that up in terms of longevity. It plays such a big role in living a long life, but also a really full, happy life. And honestly, like that's part of my podcast. The name of my podcast is Health and Humanity. And the health aspect, of course, is better nutrition, better sleep, fitness, those things that we think about when we hear the word health. But I threw in humanity in there as well, because I want this to be about human relationships, because I think that's equally as important to our overall health.
That's so cool, dude. That's cool. What got you interested in this?
I've always been interested in living a healthier lifestyle. But what's interesting is I don't have a background in health. I haven't studied it formally. I've just always been interested in eating better and getting better sleep. And I think the biggest thing for me is basically just living the best lives that we can. Like I just imagine like firing on all cylinders, right? Like just waking up feeling well rested, having energy throughout the day because you're eating the right foods and you're doing certain things to give you energy. And I'm just a big believer in connecting with people, just having really good relationships with not just the people that are in your life, like your parents and your siblings and your kids, but even just people that you interact with on a daily basis. Maybe it's your Uber driver or somebody that's, at the checkout, the cashier at the grocery store. Just living fuller and healthier lives, I think, is the main thing that excites me.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's great, man. Good for you.
Appreciate it.
Do you know why that excites you? Just as a thought.
Yeah, I think it actually kind of ties into what we're talking about with like the future self thing. I think the most powerful thing that I can think about for my future self is whenever I am on my deathbed, whenever my time comes for me to leave this earth, I want to look back and like actually matter. Like I want to, and actually Brendan Burchard, we've talked about, that's kind of his mantra is, I want to look back and ask myself, did I live? Did I matter? And there's one other question he asked. And that speaks to me. Like I want to look back and say like, I actually had an impact and I actually did something good. And that's what excites me about having a platform like a podcast and a YouTube channel is like, I can actually put out episodes with, interviews like yourself, and other guests that I have on the show, experts in all kinds of different areas. And I get to gain and grow a following of people that actually want to listen to that message. And hopefully, the end goal is that I'm actually making changes in their lives, or at least allowing them to see that there's opportunity to change. So I think that's what most excites me is that I can and actually have an impact, which is so cool. Like in 2020, somebody can just start a podcast and start talking,
right?
And like
anyone can do it.
Make a change. Yeah, anybody can do it. So
that's yeah, it's crazy, dude. It's a cool time.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. And I'm happy you actually said that it's a cool time because it's so easy to get negative. And I think a lot of people kind of go there. They're like, oh my gosh, 2020, the world's on fire. But on the flip side of that, like it's probably arguably the best time to live, like in terms of technology and what we have access to and the amount of information.
It's definitely the best time. I mean, obviously you can make the best out of any time.
Sure, exactly.
But yeah, this is the best time for humans to live.
Yep, 100%. So yeah, I just find that really interesting. Yeah, I think it's easy for people to get down. I've heard a few people talk about a lot of influencers that I follow. Lewis Howes has talked about it on a few of his podcast interviews that, so many people were excited for 2020, like the year of vision, right? Like 2020 vision. And it was going to bring clarity and just like perfect vision for the person you want to become. And I think we're getting that, right? Like at first everyone's like, whoa, no, this is not the year we were looking for. But I think with everything going on, we're getting exactly that. We're getting woken up to certain things. We're getting wake up calls on so many different levels. And I just find it to be a great opportunity.
Yep. Yeah, it's good. I mean, 2020 has been an amazing year for me.
That's great. Yeah, that's really great to hear. You talk a little bit about in your book the concept of confidence, and I guess how would you tie in confidence and having enough confidence to basically define that purpose that you're looking for? Because it's one thing to just sit down and define that purpose, but I think it also first requires self-confidence. What are your thoughts on that?
It does, because it takes confidence to make decisions. Mm-hmm. And defining a freely chosen task or defining a purpose for your future, even if that's like a 3-year mission, whatever it is you want to do, it takes confidence to say, I'm going to go forward with this because, confidence and commitment go together. Obviously, they're two different concepts, sure. But that's how you won't actually make a decision if you don't have the confidence that you're going to go through with it. Yeah. Like to actually just as an example, launch a podcast. It took commitment for you to see this through and to do episodes and stuff like that. And you wouldn't have actually gone through it if you didn't have the confidence that you could do it or that you would do it. And so, but as you go through this, then your confidence expands, which allows you to make bigger and bigger decisions. And so confidence is crucial for decision making. And if you want to make big decisions, and the challenge with big decisions is that you don't necessarily have all the details worked out. You don't know exactly what's going to happen. You don't know how it's all going to work out, but you've got the confidence that you're going to figure it out, even if you fail or flop or have to figure things out or have to go a different path or maybe have to read. And so, yeah, confidence is crucial for stepping out of your comfort zone and trying new things and figuring things out. And it builds as you make progress towards goals that are above your current self. Your confidence grows and your flexibility as a person grows as you watch yourself make progress towards, goals that are meaningful and important to you.
Yeah. So I'm sure you've heard of it. There's something called the confidence competence loop. So once you start doing something, like for me, this podcast, I've been doing for like 2 months now. I started at the beginning of quarantine, and it's brand new for me. Like I've never done a podcast or interviews or anything like this. So of course, those first several interviews, I was very nervous. I didn't have a ton of competence because I didn't have the experience in it. But I still came into it with some confidence. And as
you came in with a lot of courage is what you did.
Yeah, I guess you could say courage, yeah. And as you do more of it, you gain more competence, and in return, you're gaining more confidence. So it's just like a constant loop with the two.
Yep. I think courage is the thing that initiated it for you, though.
Yeah, that's interesting. So what...
Courage creates confidence, and it takes courage to try things that might not work, which you had to do your first several episodes. And courage is what initiated your experience, which allowed you to develop competence, which then over time became confidence. So it took courage to even try.
Interesting.
Courage is the doorway to change. Courage is the willingness to try something that might fall apart or might fail. But courage is what gives you the possibility for experiences that are above your current situation, And so you acted courageously, and you're even probably acting courageously now. So am I, to probably some degree, but that's what gives you the opportunity to gain meaningful experiences so that you can actually develop competence.
Yeah. I love that quote you just said. Courage is the gateway, did you say, or doorway to change?
It always is. Yeah. Courage to face your past, courage to define and pursue your future. Courage is always the doorway to change.
Wow.
Courage is like the line whereby your life starts getting better. Like the more courage you have, the more your experiences are going to improve, the more your outcomes are going to improve.
Man, I love that. What can we be doing to foster more courage? I mean, I guess at the end of the day, it's just diving in, and that's basically what I did. I remember that first podcast episode I did. I was so nervous, and I still do get nervous, by the way. So I guess there is still a level of courage I need to have for each interview. But I remember that first interview, I was so nervous, and it just started. Like, we just hit the record button, we started, and it all worked out. But what can we be doing to kind of develop a little bit more courage in ourselves?
Yeah. Courage, so the scientific definition of it is it's like the intentional pursuit of a worthwhile goal involving risk. You know what I mean? Okay. So there's some form of risk there, like whether it's social, whether it's emotional, whether it's financial. You're trying something that there's some risk involved. If it doesn't work, there's some, but you're trying something. And I think that the way you get better at courage, and by the way, your future is as big as you're willing to be courageous. You know what I mean? Like, so you clarify what you want, and then you put yourself out there and you actually try, as you said, like you become less attached to your emotions in the moment. So courage and what's called psychological flexibility go together. Flexibility meaning you're not so absorbed by your emotions, you handle them, so like if you want to get married to a really beautiful girl, like, how do you build more courage? Well, you start asking the beautiful girls out, you know what I mean? Or what, vice versa, but like, you get to the point where you just stop worrying so much about the initial results. You're not, I like the quote, expect everything, but attach to nothing.
Okay.
So of course you're going to expect success, but like, you don't attach to this failure. You're more committed to the long-term goal. And it's, courage is a muscle, but what's nice about it is the more you try, the more confidence over time you build. Obviously, with courage comes the potential for failure, and you don't want to attach to the failures, or else that'll actually destroy your confidence.
Interesting.
And so you gotta like not be so defined or attached again by this moment. That's the whole fixed mindset versus growth mindset thing. If you try something and it fails, you're not defined by who you are today. You got to go back and try again. It's like basketball. Like sometimes it takes freaking courage to shoot that 3-pointer on the buzzer, right? But like, and you might miss, but you got to like keep doing it. And eventually you'll get better and better at, being a game closer, you know? So people like Kobe Bryant, like those guys, like they just kept throwing them up.
Yep.
Like, it's like a numbers game. You just keep trying, and over time you just realize that the odds are in your favor over time.
Yeah. Well, it was Michael Jordan. His quote was, I miss 100% of the shots that I don't take. And that might sound a little cheesy or a little cliche, but it's so true. It's putting that in repetition and just having the courage to take the shot,
Yeah, you miss all the shots you don't take, for sure.
What about, so obviously there's a level of fear, right? What about the topic of fear in terms of, 'cause I almost see like that the trajectory there is, fear is almost the thing that you have first before you can, you have to have courage to, I guess courage is the first thing, because you have to have courage to overcome the fear to then move on.
Well, you have to have an intention first.
Okay.
You wouldn't really have fear if you didn't have a goal, or if there wasn't something to do. So like, you actually have to have a destination or a goal or an outcome that you want.
Yep.
And then between you and that outcome, I wouldn't even call it fear. I'd call it uncertainty.
Okay.
Uncertainty or unknown is kind of the basis of fear, like, so it's really uncertainty that you're afraid of. And you're afraid of it because your brain is literally hardwired to predict the outcomes of your behavior. We form memories and have experiences so that we can predict what's going to happen, and when you try something new, you experience emotions such as fear because you don't know what's going to happen. And so you got to get used to handling uncertainty.
Yep.
And the more you get used to that, the more flexible you'll become, the better you can handle being in situations where you don't know where it's going to go. And you stop needing to be in situations where it's like super safe and predictable and stable. You can get more and more flexible of being in bigger and more challenging situations, which does take courage. But over time, you get so flexible with it that you have the confidence to handle a lot of different situations.
Yep.
And so then you have a lot more possibility in your life because you're not so constrained by, here's how all the perfect conditions must be, and I got to be in my tight little corner. It's like, no, I'll figure this out. Like, you become more adaptive, which is really crucial to obviously moving forward in your life, especially from like a Charles Darwin perspective. He said that it's not the smartest that are the ones who succeed. It's not the ones who are the most intelligent. It's the ones who are the most adaptable and flexible to change.
I love that you just said that. And I think it's so applicable to life today. I know me personally, and
things are changing a lot, man.
Yeah, I'm sure so many people out there that I think the biggest thing that we were fearful of, and I say we, but really myself, when everything hit with the lockdowns and quarantine and everything, it was uncertainty. That was the thing that was just like hovering over me, was just like uncertainty. What's going to happen to my business? What's going to happen to my relationships? What's going to happen to my health? Like, am I going to get this virus?
So what did you do to get yourself out of that mode?
I spent a lot of time, there's a few things. I think number one was I put my health number one. And I spent a lot of time looking at my health. Like, okay, I'm not eating well, right? Like, I need to improve my nutrition. I need to sleep better. I need to exercise more because I kind of got into a rut of not really exercising like I was before. And just focusing on that overall health, but specifically my immune system. Because I figured if I get this virus, like if I have a strong immune system, I'm going to have a better shot of beating it. So that was like the first thing, was just focusing in on my health and going for walks and going, exercising more, running, all of that. And then I think it was just kind of time, over time, I realized that I'm going to control the things that I can control. I'm going to double down on my relationships. I'm going to call my parents more and FaceTime and have Zoom meetings with my friends, people I haven't talked to in a little bit because, I let life get so busy. So I'm going to just kind of go back to that. I'm going to go back to just improving my relationships and improving my health. And I think by doing those first foundational steps, it kind of got me past that fear of uncertainty.
That's good. Yeah, it's good to have people around you as well who have a better perspective than you. Like, I have like a really amazing financial advisor as an example, and like he was able to like be like, dude, I've never been through COVID-19.
Yeah.
But we've been through lots of crazy things, and the market's gonna probably dip, but it's eventually gonna keep going up. So it's good to have also perspectives beyond your own.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where it's like you can draw on the knowledge and wisdom of people who are smarter than you.
100%. And that was actually the next thing I was going to talk about. So I'm so happy you brought up the idea of having other people around you who can give you different perspective. There's something in your book you talk about empathetic witnesses. So how does someone create a network of these empathetic witnesses who actively encourage you through highs and lows of life, especially during times of like extreme growth? So how can you build that network of people who will uplift you?
I think first you need to be that to someone else. You need to be someone who's genuinely there for other people.
Yeah.
But I think also it's just about actively creating a network around you of people who you can talk to. Like I've got various family members, various friends, various mentors where I'm having a bad day. I've got like a pretty good list of people I could call and reach out to where I can just get a different perspective. And that's really what you need to reframe is a different perspective, or just even just dumping out your overwhelm or your emotions to someone who can listen to you and who has the ability to not just like, they'll definitely like empathize, empathetic witness, but they'll also give you perspectives, whether it be spiritual, emotional, whatever, where they can really help you get through that. And so I think, it's up to you to find those types of people and just develop relationships with people who matter. They don't have to be mentors that you're paying for, although they could be a therapist you're paying for. It could be though, just a friend from the freaking gym. Like when I met a guy at the gym of all places, and this was years ago, but like he's become one of my best friends. I don't even live in the same state as him anymore, but like he's someone who's like literally 30 years older than me. Might even be more. Probably 30-ish years older than me.
Okay.
But he's super fit, super just really wise man.
Yeah.
And if you just are willing to go up and talk to people, you can develop relationships with almost anyone.
I love that. I also, I really am coming around to the idea, and truthfully, I haven't been practicing this the last few months, and I should be because it's helpful, and I know it's helpful. But there's this idea that if you are in a rut, like let's just say you're in an emotional rut or you're going through depression, or just a general like hardship in life, a good practice is to actually do something good for somebody else, like send them a thank you note or just a letter or even a text. Like it can just be a text message to people.
The more of that kind of stuff you do, the better your life will be.
Yeah.
And the more thoughtful, sending a text is excellent. Sending a handwritten letter is a step up. You know what I mean? So like, but text, do it. Don't, the more of that kind of stuff you do, the more happy you'll be 100%. As a person.
There's a friend of mine, he just shared with me that he has a list in his phone of people that are meaningful to him, people that have value in his life. And he just creates a running list. And if he encounters somebody or if he thinks of somebody that's meaningful to him, he'll just add them to the list. And then like once a week or a couple times a week, he'll just go through that list and start texting people, checking in on them, saying hi, letting them know that they're important to him. And I just thought that was such a cool exercise that I'm going to start implementing in my life. Because as you said, the more you do that kind of stuff, just the better your life will be, the healthier relationships will be.
I think what you're saying is really exciting because this is kind of the whole point, is that you can change and influence who you are by the decisions you make. And you can make better decisions when you learn more and have better examples. And so like if you actually implement that idea that you just heard from that other person, you as a person will change over time into a better and a different version of yourself. And so that's what's exciting is that we don't have to be stuck the way we are. Like we can improve our knowledge and improve our practices by just simply doing different things than we used to do in better, more thoughtful, and we can become better, different versions of ourselves and create better outcomes for our lives. I mean, it's really exciting. Like I could create a better relationship with my wife and kids, just as an example, but I would need to go out and learn how to do that. And if I want to have a better relationship with my wife and kids, I can learn better ways to be a better husband and father and create a lot better situations than I have. Not that my situation is not great, but I think it's just a lot of people don't spend very much time actively learning better ways to live and then implementing them. And implementing them isn't always that difficult.
Sure. And that's actually the biggest piece is in something that I need to do a better job of is learning and gaining knowledge and information on how to do certain things, which I do a pretty good job of, but I need to get better at actually taking action on that. Like I learn, okay, this is a cool practice, and then I might just let it go to the wayside instead of taking action on that. So I think that's the big key is you can learn all you want, but if you don't implement it into your life, it's not going to have any benefit.
Yeah, and implementation is, and it's an experimental practice. It's
Mm-hmm.
something to try new things every day. I mean,
Yeah.
that's people stop developing and aging because they stop trying new things. As kids, you're
Yeah.
trying new things all the time, right? But like as people age, they stop being open to having new experiences.
Yep.
And so, if you just make it a regular practice to be constantly trying and experimenting and doing new things, then you can get better at dealing with uncertainty.
Right. 100%. That's awesome. What is there anything else from the book? Any kind of key takeaways, especially that idea of personality, isn't permanent. What else have we not touched on that you want to maybe touch on a little bit further?
I think that we're pretty much there, my friend.
Yeah.
I will just say that there's an enormous amount of research that's going to show that your
Okay.
personality will change over time, whether
Yeah.
you do anything about it or not. There's a lot of research to show that you can intentionally improve upon your personality, whether that's to become better with people, be better organized, be more creative.
Mm.
Um, and really the goal. So I would say for the bulk of people, unfortunately, it's just the case is that the biggest predictor of their future behavior is going to be their past. And the reason for that is because they're not being super intentional
Yep.
about their environment, about their future self, about investing in themselves,
Mm.
about their story, their narrative, and their identity.
Mm.
And so the goal that I'm trying to present to people is that your future self is the thing guiding and dictating your daily behavior, not your former self, not who you were yesterday.
Yep.
But in order to do that, you've got to clarify your future self. Then you've got to be pretty serious about it. You've got to change your environment. You got to change your story.
Mm.
Put yourself in new situations.
Yep.
But that's how you grow, and that's how you continue to evolve as a person, rather than hit some glass ceiling and just kind of overly solidify into a whatever version of yourself you are.
Sure.
So, yeah, that's just basically the invitation of the book. A lot of science to kind of show how it works. This book has like 150 journal prompts for reframing trauma and also for clarifying future self. And would definitely encourage people to go check it out.
Yeah, that's awesome. So before I get to my last question, I want you to have the opportunity to share where people can find you. The book, I'm sure, obviously it's Amazon. Is there anywhere else that people can find the new book?
Yeah, I mean, they can get the book anywhere, wherever you buy books. My website's benjaminhardy.com. There's, free giveaways there, future self checklist, cool. 20-minute training on clarifying your future self and stuff. So there's a lot of stuff at benjaminhardy.com.
Perfect. And I'll link all your social profiles as well in the description and show notes. Excellent. And by the way, the release date is coming up in about a week or so for your new book.
June 16th.
June 16th. Awesome. So if you're listening to this episode and it's after June 16th, it'll be available. Be sure to go check that out. Excellent. So my last question for you that I have here is, who do you want to impact the most with your work?
That's a good question. I definitely am interested in kind of two audiences right now. One are the people who literally are stuck, like in traumatic, like the hopelessness of trauma.
Yep.
Like, I'm kind of interested in like both ends of the spectrum, actually, rather than the middle. People who are really struggling or people who are already succeeding, but like just need that next level.
Okay.
Those are the types of people who I want to help. And I think that this book can help both, someone who has already, has thrown in the towel. I think that this book will prove to them that doesn't have to be the case. And then anyone who's already crushing it, a lot of high achievers or very successful people need this stuff too.
For sure. Yeah, I can tell, I have the PDF version of it. And so I got a sneak peek of it before launch. And just through our conversation here, I can tell it's a really powerful and meaningful message. And there's so many great ideas on how to get out if you are in a rut, to get past that and see that your past doesn't have to be who you are today and certainly not in the future. So I think
huge.
Yeah, I think really what you're doing here in this book is just an awesome message. And I hope, and I'm sure you do as well, that it's going to really have an impact on so many different people.
Thanks, man. Yeah. I believe it will.
Awesome. So good. Well, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you coming on, Ben, and sharing your message and your story, and everything you're doing is really incredible. So keep up all the great work.
You too.
Awesome.
Grateful to be with you today.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks so much, and you have a great day.
Thanks, man.